Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Motive, Social Motivation for the Creative Class. I'm your host, Tim Fulton, here with our featured creative, Steve Anderson. Independent filmmaker, author, father, former/future computer programmer.
Yes, all those.
Recently published a compendium, 13 short stories in the book 1975.
1979.
1979.
Short story collection. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and Lost Weekend Records.
Good. And available right outside here.
Exactly. And in the trunk of my car.
Yeah. You got it, just like mixtapes in the old days.
That's right.
Steve, what's your background? What brings you to Columbus?
What brings me to Columbus is Route 23. Just early in the 80s, I load up the car and came to OSU and studied in computer science and got a job and went to it from there.
And you decided to stay. You still have certainly roots back home, right?
Yes.
Where are you from?
Bainbridge. It's back down 23 and turn right down Route 50, another 20 miles, and it's up this beautiful valley called Paint Valley, a little small town called Bainbridge. That's kind of, growing up there, it was like ringed with about 10 sawmills, and so it was logging community was very big down there.
In Columbus, you got involved in bands. You started while you were doing computer programming for some larger corporations.
Yep, the man.
The man. You did some independent filmmaking,
Yes.
and sort of, as we talked about, you sort of culled together the friends and family that you knew in order to get that done, but with no formal training.
Correct. Yeah. When I first came to Columbus, and started at OSU. I landed a part-time job at the old High Life restaurant. I don't know if anybody remembers that, parking cars. And that was back when OSU still had its film school. And I happened to work with a guy named Bugsy, who was a film school student. And we'd hang out, and but he would share, he had a great passion for him. And he would share these, his film school experience with me. And I would, became friends with him, and I got to help him on set some. And but I remember one time he was telling me about this Eastern European professor he had, and he said the guy was just kind of insane. He would go into these long diatribes, and he would talk about the Three Stooges films. Actually, the director was Del Lloyd, I believe, and he would say if you look at those films and you would study them, there's no fluff. Every scene is meaningful, and that's why 80 years later they're still funny. And he said, the guy in that thick accent, he'd be like, see his head right there. You need to become the toilet bowl, and I thought that was great. So I took that, as one of the tools in trying to to learn it. And whether it's writing or writing scripts or film, like, everything has to mean something. There's no fluff. You could stop the film or stop the book anywhere, and it's a beautiful scene.
Well, and it's a concise piece, right?
Yeah.
Whether you know what happened before it or what happened after it.
Right.
So you were inspired to do that, but you had no formal training. You didn't sort of drop out of the program that you were in. You had to learn it yourself.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't want to become a starving artist right yet. So
Was that the motivation, truly? Was that it? Like you got into computer science because you...
Well, I like immediate gratification, and with the computer sciences, you can get that. And but with film, or working with film or the creative outlet, there's just much more of a pool. I don't know. I can't explain it. I get restless, and I just need to create something, whether it's writing music or writing scripts or writing stories and stuff. I just need to create. I have to. So
I think what's interesting about you and what you've talked about is from music to film to the book, you come into it an amateur, and while you are receiving some compensation for it, at least the book, or at least making up the cost for doing it.
Got my gas down here, so.
Yes, it got you gas to be here today. You make an attempt, and then you reach out and hone it, or at least with the filmmaking, you had to study up with books and study up with how to shoot things. What's the equipment? What's the narrative?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit, either film or writing, sort of what the process was from the get-go?
Well, yeah, they kind of like lend to themselves, and writing this book is just a culmination of everything I've done so far, but a little bit, I don't want to say harder, but just different. With the film, I don't know, I just don't have patience, I guess, going the traditional route, and it's either from, I don't know, being either too stupid to know I shouldn't, or being too cocky to know that I could. So I would, when I was going to OSU, I bought a Super 8 camera, and I'm like getting with my buddies and making little shorts. And as I progressed, and I wanted to make it better, I didn't want to be lame, People have busy lives. They don't want to like be watching something that's lame, so right. So I studied film. I would, just like what you hear the big dogs say, it's actually studying film. You look at those clips and you're like, well, if it's action, you want the character to be big, you need to like shoot up, or if you want him to be ugly and scary, you do a close up or shoot down if you want him to look vulnerable, or if the pacing, is like, some clips are like, or like 3 seconds to go boom boom or longer. That's all. When film is made, it's not all accident or just like, let's just try this. No, everything has a meaning. Everything is like precise, and there's a pacing, there's a beat, and when I would edit, and also in writing the books, I would get my camera and when I get on my scooter and I'm riding around town, and I'm like, wow, look at that, and I would find a scene, or it was usually like some gritty post-apocalyptic looking landscape, and that would be awesome to shoot something there, and I would write a scene about it, and it would just expand from there. But with books, you don't have the luxury of having the background and the soundtrack. And,
the scene is written for you in film, right?
Yeah, in the book you have to create that with your words, the imagery you want the reader to have, and you have to create that pace.
So as you were setting out to, as a side note, you ended up getting laid off from your job, and so had the ability to sort of take this time and sit down and say, what's my next project, in a good way.
Right.
And also had the good fortune of having an English major living in your house.
Yeah, that helped.
God bless her.
Yep.
And so you set out and you wrote a couple of those stories and you handed them over.
Yeah.
And then what?
Yeah, well, I was actually in the process of starting another film, and that, it's trying to get punk rockers is like trying to herd cats, so it kind of didn't happen. But, I still had to do something, So this friend shared this story with me, and it was such a sweet, great story. And I'm like, man, and she'd never told anybody this story before, and I don't know if that's being a douche that I just wrote a story for everybody to read about it, but she said it was okay. So, but anyway, the idea was her story, and I wrote it, but I embellished it and made it my own, and blah blah blah. The collection that I've written is this collection of coming of age stories growing up, and I think it's what drew me to it. And when I wrote this story is I don't know. Everybody experiences this, everybody when you there's that time in your life at that age when everybody is like the closest to their animal heritage, with their sex and their violence, and and it's true. And everybody, when you're going through that coming of age period, you're experiencing these life molding things for the first time, and your emotions are raw, and you haven't failed big yet. So everybody's kind of equal, and the innocence is real. So the drama in that time period of people's lives is, I think, I don't know, compelling to me. And
well, there's a reason why you wrote the book, and there's a reason why so many sort of narratives are written about that time.
Yeah.
And regarding your friend who you heard the story and then wrote the story again, and obviously you framed it, but I think great artists steal.
Yeah.
And that there is
beg and borrow.
Sort of, well, you beg, you borrow, you steal, and you put your work into it. You know, that person who told the story didn't write it, you know.
Yeah.
And while it may be a true story and something that happened to them, I think there's a debate to be had about that stealing.
Yeah.
So once you've got 13 stories, you have run it through your wife, you have hired a content editor, you have hired a copy editor.
Right.
You learn, you know, that there are all these things that you need to do. Do you not have a problem looking at your own work?
Do I have a problem looking at my own work?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I love my own work.
I am a big fan of my own voice. I have a very difficult time. I will not watch this interview again.
You won't?
No. Benji will edit it, and I will make sure the levels seem good, and as he will flip through all 3 camera angles, and I will never watch it again, because I don't want to watch myself do it. And I have the same problem with audio I record, or frankly, my writing. Is that simply not a problem you have?
Well, yes and no.
I am okay with just the yes. You don't have to give a long answer because I have a follow-up.
Okay.
Is it yes or no? Do you have...
It's a shorty question. Okay. I don't like reading it when it hasn't become that familiar album to me yet. When I'm reading it and I hit a spot and I'm like, oh shit, what do I do? Because that doesn't feel right. Or, you know... But once I get past that and it feels all good all the way through me, I mean, the second story in the book called Motel Pool, I love the ending, and I even wrote it, you know, and so
You wrote the whole thing.
I wrote the whole thing, but the ending's awesome, man.
So my follow-up is, how do you have the wisdom to know to have your wife, to have professional editors look at it as well, and not just think, well, this is really fucking good.
Yeah.
I'm done. Put it in a book. Let's do it.
Well, when my wife tells me that you need to fix that, so that's the shortcut. That's the short answer.
That's the testament for it.
Yeah. You got to be, I don't know. You got to be. Criticism is a gift, you know. So when somebody tells you something, because it kind of takes balls to like say, hey, your shit's messed up, man. So if they do that, listen, you know. So
I think it takes balls to say, look at my shit.
Well, I kind of knew that. Well, I knew that kind of going in. I was going to be getting that. But, you know, I really wanted to do this, and I was willing to, you know, get banged around a little bit to get there. So
I think that, frankly, your need to create and your ability to say, here's my shit, is a gift. What keeps you in Columbus?
What keeps me in Columbus is, I don't know, I just like that. I just love this town. There's a lot of like-minded people here that embrace stupid things, you know, and in a good way, you know. It's like, and they're willing to try things, you know. I just love that.
At some point, we will talk about the rope bridge in your backyard, the pirate radio station that you started on the block where I grew up.
Yeah.
But for now,
For now.
Steve Anderson, thank you so much for your time.
You.